So Bernie Sanders did an ad against Joe Biden on the topic of the Iraq war. Now, I believe this is just a social media ad. In other words, they're not running this in any particular state at the moment, but still, this is good. Take a look.
Contrary to what some in my party might think, Iraq was a problem that had to be dealt with.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Weapons of mass destruction.
We thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't, but...
I never believed what Cheney and Bush said about Iraq.
I'm an Iraq veteran. I shipped to Iraq exactly 6 days after the war started. As a veteran, I didn't see a lot of Trump children or other rich kids in the military. The military is all people from middle class and lower middle class backgrounds. Those are the people that go to fight the wars. I remember all the ginning up towards the war in Iraq, and I see the same thing now.
Soleimani was plotting imminent and sinister attacks on American diplomats and military personnel.
We have every expectation that people not only in Iraq, but in Iran will view the American action last night as giving them freedom.
Well, I support Bernie Sanders because he doesn't take money from the defense contractors. He hasn't been meeting with people to start the wars. He's been meeting with people to fight the wars. Bernie Sanders meets with working class families who have had family members who have fought in Iraq. They show him what it's like when you come back from a war. If you don't meet with those people, you don't understand that kind of hardship. Bernie Sanders is somebody who understands that these people don't want their children to go off and fight in foreign wars.
I know that it is rarely the children of the billionaire class who face the agony of reckless foreign policy. It is the children of working families. I met with the mothers of the young men who lost their lives in that war. War is a horror. And it's time politicians understood that we have got to do everything humanly possible to avoid war.
The Iraq war cost us roughly $2 trillion. It cost us the lives of 4,500 soldiers and 500,000 Iraqi citizens. Donald Trump has fundamentally broken his two most important promises to the middle class. He promised to help the middle class with jobs, and he promised to keep us out of foreign wars. In his time in office so far, he has cut taxes for the rich and put us on a path to war with one of the most powerful countries in the Middle East. We need steady leadership that's going to repair our international relations. Bernie Sanders has always had the same view. When he gets into office, he's not going to all of a sudden change and decide, I like wars all of a sudden. We know where he stands on wars because he stood the same way he's always stood on the wars.
A preemptive war against Iraq would be a terrible mistake.
That is the definition of steady leadership.
That was a really good ad, and there was a hell of a lot of substance in it. Again, that one's not running on TV, I don't think, particularly because it's long. It's like over 2 minutes and 30 seconds. But it's something he released on social media. It has over 1 million views on social media. And that's just powerful. And one of the themes you realize with Bernie, and we all know this, we've known this since 2015, 2016, always comes back to substance, always does it. And by the way, that is the strongest possible thing you can imagine against Donald Trump. I always said the toughest part for Bernie is going to be getting through the primary. But if he gets through the primary, I think he'll have an easier time against Trump, even though Trump still has a decent chance at re-election. Don't get it twisted. I'm not underestimating Trump by any stretch of the imagination. But he always goes back to the substance, always right back to substance, right back to substance. It's what he does. It's in his DNA. And, it's become a talking point that we say casually, but people really need to stop and reflect on what it means that the Iraq war happened and that politicians like Joe Biden supported it, and he supported it enthusiastically no matter what he says now, okay? He really did support it enthusiastically. So I just want to remind you how bad the Iraq war was. And there was an article that came out in Business Insider. It's citing a study from the Brookings Institute called the Costs of War Project. And Brookings Institute, if I remember correctly, it's like a center-left organization. It's not even like Code Pink or an actual lefty, non-interventionist, thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I agree with the people in Code Pink, obviously. But I'm just saying that it relatively nonpartisan. And the report came out in 2013, and the stuff that we learned about the Iraq war, even back in 2013, which is 7 years ago now, and we're still there. But the numbers were mind-boggling. So back in 2013, there were already 189,000 direct war deaths, which don't include the people that died in the war due to hardship. That's direct war deaths. There were about 5,000 U.S. service personnel that were killed directly. There were 32,223 troops that were injured, and that doesn't include PTSD. We know the PTSD is through the roof. We know we have a suicide epidemic because a lot of these people who were sent to the Middle East and then they come back, their lives are never the same. They feel broken, and then they kill themselves. And, you know, hey, if you're one of those people, listen, there's hope, and we can get you help. And, you know, especially with something like Medicare for All, which we're fighting for, it would give people the mental health care that they absolutely need. But, I mean, look at that, man. 32,223 troops injured. That's physical injuries, not even PTSD. That's a whole nother thing when you add in PTSD. There were 655,000 people who died in Iraq since the invasion who would not have died if the invasion had not occurred. 655,000. Reporters. 150 reporters were killed in the war. There were 2.8 million people who are either internally displaced in Iraq or they fled the country. There's been $1.7 trillion spent. That's the amount in war expenses spent by the U.S. Treasury Department as through fiscal year 2013. Now, I mean, obviously that number is way higher. The amount of money spent in Iraq per second, $5,000. We've been there 17 years. 17 years. $5,000 per second. That's your money. That's my money. That's our tax money. That's what it's going towards. This guy voted for it, and then he has the nerve to turn around and say, yeah, Medicare for all, trillions of dollars, puh. We don't like Medicare for all, puh. How you gonna pay for it, Bernie? How you gonna pay for it? How are you gonna pay for the war that you enthusiastically supported? I got more numbers for you. You know how much it costs to deploy one American military member to the Middle East? $350,000. The amount of money in war benefits that's owed to veterans, $490 billion. The projected total cost of the war, when all is said and done and you account for the interest because the war was paid for with a lot of borrowed money, $7 trillion. That's what it's going to cost us by 2053. $7 trillion. $20 billion was paid to just KBR, just that one defense contractor for equipment and services. These are the war profiteers, guys. Go watch the documentary Iraq for Sale, The War Profiteers, to be blown away. Because you'll see a lot of this was a scam. A lot of this was the military-industrial complex going, oh, it's time to get paid, son. And they know Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney, was one of the top people in the company, Halliburton. He got an exit bonus of millions of dollars, and then boom, the war happens. He gives no-bid contracts to Halliburton and KBR. KBR, I think, is their parent company. So people are getting rich off of misery and death and war and violence. $3 billion was the amount of KBR payments that Pentagon auditors considered questionable and couldn't account for. $3 billion. People were stealing money from the taxpayers during this war. People were getting rich off of this. Again, a lot of people who watch this show might be on the younger side and they really don't know about what happened in the Iraq war and just how bad it was and just how disastrous it is. But this is what I'm trying to educate you on right now. And these are old figures. So everything is worse now. But, really try to wrap your mind around what this does to a generation. What this does to people my age and a little older than me who watched all this unfold. What does that do to us? You know what it does? It makes us go, oh my God, they're all corrupt. Except for one guy. His name's Bernie Sanders. He opposed this. So I'll give you some more here. There are 1.6 million gallons of oil used by U.S. forces each day in Iraq. $12 billion per month is the cost of Iraq. This was by 2008. I'm sure that figure has oscillated quite a bit up to this day. $7 billion is the amount owed to Iraq by the U.S. after the war, mostly due to fraud. $20 billion it costs just to do annual air conditioning. There's $546 million missing in spare parts. Get this, and this is going to blow your mind. There are 190,000 guns that are missing. And you know who those ended up going to? Take a guess. Our enemies, including ISIS. 190,000 guns just went missing. Wow, look at that. 40%. There's been a 40% increase in Iraqi oil production after we invaded. Wow. So maybe the war had something to do with the oil. There were $5 billion of revenue from Iraqi oil in 2003. By 2011, that figure became $85 billion. Insanity. $150 billion is the amount that oil companies are expected to invest in oil development over the next decade. $75 billion is the approximate amount expected to go to American subcontracting companies, the biggest of all, Halliburton. And then the last number here, which is perhaps the most important number, and you'll know why, is 0. There were 0 weapons of mass destruction found. This is what Joe Biden supported. Every single Democrat who has run for the presidency, who has supported the Iraq war, has lost. There are 2 people left who are viable, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden supported it. Bernie Sanders fought against it every step of the way. Bernie was right. He's the most electable option, and he's right. Keep that in mind.